Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And it seems the NHS are incapable of learning very simple lessons. After the Ferrari and court cases involving the Tavistock Clinic, you would think they would be far more cautious when it came to the mass sterilisation of children. But alas, this seems to not be the case. For in Scotland, the NHS is now freely giving out puberty blockers to children as young as 9. These children have not been diagnosed as gender dysphoric, and they're sometimes described as troubled or confused or even autistic. Certainly these are not grounds for sterilising them and for pushing them down a one-way street at the age of 9. So what the hell is going on? Let's look at this article. And it's horrifying that it's allowed. So, puberty blockers given to children as young as 9 at Scotland's Tavistock Centre. The Sandyford Clinic is under fire for giving life-changing medication to autistic and troubled youngsters who may have been misdiagnosed as trans or even not diagnosed at all. The bombshell report has blasted the Sandyford Sexual Health Clinic in Glasgow. The dossier found that dozens of young children were put on puberty blockers. Many patients are said to have been misdiagnosed when given the blockers. A leading psychiatrist said that the controversial clinic should be closed down. They're closing down the Tavistock for exactly the same thing. All these clinics should be closed down. Why are they allowed to take 9-year-old children and destroy their futures and sterilise them without full sort of medical examination, psychiatric examination? There's no accountability here, and children are going to be destroyed because of this push, because nobody dares say no, because as I've explained in previous videos, the moment you say no, the woke wankerati and the trans lobby are jumping all over these people. And they get and the nurses and that they get threats of being fired if they dare stand up and say, actually, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with this child. It's not gender dysphoria. It's something else. Oh, you just keep your mouth shut. Or if they say they're highlighting things, they get told, shut up, toe the line, or you'll lose your job. Because these people are making a lot of money out of this. Anyway, going into the article, and I can feel this is going to be one I get angry about. I got angry enough at Tavistock, and I had no idea that there was other clinics that were doing worse. Children as young as 9 have been handed prescriptions for puberty blockers at a Scots gender clinic dubbed Scotland's Tavistock, according to an investigation. The report by the NHS clinicians found youngsters with gender dysphoria had been given the medication at the NHS-run National Gender Service in Glasgow, a disproportionate number of whom were on the autistic spectrum. Well, it's no wonder, because for those who don't know, anyone on the autistic spectrum has a problem with communication. And sometimes they go along with things because they lack the ability to say no or to contradict what's being said. And so they're being pushed down this road, and really inside they're probably screaming no, 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 but they don't have the ability to say it. And so this is actually the most awful case of forced sterilisation since the camps in the Second World War. This is what this is. This is exactly parallel to the forced sterilisation of children by those terrible people in the 30s and 40s in Germany. You can't say the word because YouTube, but you know exactly who I mean. And they are forcing these children down there, and some of these children are not even capable of saying no. They're not capable of saying, no, actually, this isn't what I want, or it isn't what I need. I didn't come here for this. But because they have this agenda of push, 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 because they've got the trans lobby at their back, they've got the woke wankerati running them, nobody dares say no. Anyone who does, like I say, gets threatened. And so these children are just pushed down this machine and sterilised en masse. It is horrific that this is still going on after all that's come out over the Tavistock Clinic. Do these people not understand what they're doing? Or maybe they do understand and they're doing it deliberately, in which case there's no way they should be practicing medicine. Many had also got conditions such as anxiety and depression, raising fears over future legal action for those who may claim to have been misdiagnosed. Every single one of them. Because if you've got depression, for example, that would be picked up by a psychiatrist. And so it wouldn't be gender dysphoria, it'd be depression, and he could treat that. So this is going to show that these children are not getting fully diagnosed. And yet if they're having this most awful life-changing treatment without full diagnosis, then they've got nothing to stand on. I mean, they're going to get sued to smithereens. But there's no consent, is there? There's no informed consent. And without informed consent, you should be doing nothing as a medical person. Now, I hope that whoever's doing this does spend a lot of time in prison, but I hope they're also personally sued to absolute smithereens. I want them to be poverty-ridden. I want them to come out of prison and go live on the streets, because the house will have to be sold to pay the monies that they're going to owe. I want everything stripped from these people. They don't own a bean, and then they do their time in prison. Because if you did this to any other human being, if I went up to a street and gelded a man, you guarantee I'm doing a long stretch in prison. But what they're doing is no different. They're just doing it with a medical doctorate. Well, probably not even that. But if the way they're doing it is this, then that medical doctor isn't, they're not acting as doctors of medicine. They're acting as camp guards. They're acting as brutalists. This is horrific. Anyway, the dossier revealed parallels between Sandyford Clinic in Glasgow and the Tavistock Child Gender Identity Development Service in London. I'd also say parallels with, Auschwitz. It was set to be closed down after it was heavily criticised in a report by Dr. Hilary Cass, whose report said it was unsafe for its young patients. Well, it's no less unsafe than this one. The report into the National Gender Identity Service revealed a total of 91 youngsters aged between 9 and 17 were referred to paediatric endocrinology between 2011 and 2019. 2/3 of those were referred as birth-assigned females. Now, I hate this term because nobody assigns anything at birth. Your sex is determined upon the moment of conception. You get assigned anything. You don't have a little nurse with a clipboard coming out, oh yes, you're a boy, tick. You don't get assigned anything. You are. There's no assignation on this. It's what you are. Anyway, almost a quarter were on the autistic spectrum. So 25% of them were autistic. And 37% had mental health conditions such as depression. So between the 25% autistic and 37% mental health conditions. Now, okay, there's going to be some overlap. There may be some autistic that have mental health issues. But even so, you've got to be looking well over half of these people are not gender dysphoric. And yet here they are being pushed down this one-way street by these terrible, terrible medicos who must be on a backhander and who are obviously part of the lobby, the trans lobby, because no one else but the trans lobby would do this to children. No doctor would do this to a child unless he had an ulterior motive. So that goes to show you exactly what these people are. Only 6 out of 64 young people eligible for fertility preservation completed the process. So less than 10% of them who were offered fertility preservation actually did it. So that means over 90% of these people, these young kids, are now sterile and have zero chance of ever becoming a parent. Isn't this horrific? Campaigners have called for the clinic to be closed, razed to the ground, and every single person in there prosecuted. A spokesman for campaign group For Women Scotland said, "The parallels with the ill-fated Tavistock are stark. Endocrinologists are halting children's puberty with experimental medications. Well, yeah, this is exactly what it is. This is Mengele. These people are Joseph bloody Mengele. It is essential that the Scottish Government acts immediately to close Sandyford. Not to do so would be a gross medical negligence and likely to attract, as is happening in England, legal cases from former patients. I will say that it's very unlikely to happen because we know the wee poisonous dwarf, Nicola Sturgeon, who's pushing through this Gender Equality Act by hook or by crook. She is so desperate for it because she's one of those that wants to harm children. She has made it quite clear the safety of children is in no way important to her. So this is probably not going to come from her. It does take the rest of the SNP. We do know that there are some members of the SNP that have got morals, they have got ethics, they have got a soul, but not Nicola Sturgeon. Jesus, that is the most awful, awful little shart of shite that ever stood in Parliament. Scottish Parliament notwithstanding. Dr. David Bell, a psychiatrist who raised concerns about the Tavistock, said there is a lack of evidence worldwide on the effects of prescribing puberty blockers for gender dysphoria, and there is a significant concern that they may interfere with brain and bone development. You're basically stupefying children. You are, apart from sterilising them, you're giving them brain damage and developmental damage because the trans lobby say it's very, very important that we turn boys into girls and girls into boys because then everybody can be equal. Because you're not equal. You lot are mentally ill and you're dangerous, right? And you're doing this to children. And don't anyone sit there and be thinking, oh, but, transgender, this, that and the other. Well, if, let live and let live, let them just get on with it. No, because this is what they're doing. This lobby is pushing for the endangerment and permanent damage to children. This is who they are, and they're cozying up, and they're going to say they're cozying up with the P's, but most of them are, because they have an absolute obsession with children. Like, this cannot be highlighted enough, the way they go for children. Anyway, a national gender service is the wrong model. These children and young people need to be understood in the context of other mental health issues they are experiencing, because gender dysphoria is a mental issue. It's not a physical issue. You cannot cure this by having bits hacked off. You have to address the underlying problem. The findings are revealed in a research paper by NHS clinicians who carried out an appraisal of the Scottish service, which they says has clear benefits for youngsters with gender dysphoria, as it has a range of different specialists, none of whom apparently see the bloody children. They have praised the service offered by the youngsters with gender dysphoria, referred to endocrinologists at the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow for puberty-suppressing medication. Dr. Bell also told The Telegraph the very act of starting them is putting them on a medical pathway. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there's one of the few in Scotland that's standing up for this, next to the most evil woman you will ever meet in terms of her lack of respect for women and for children. She's pushing that, like I say, she's pushing that gender act, that gender bill through Parliament that will allow fully grown and fully intact men the right to walk into women's changing rooms and undress, regardless of whether there's children there, because you cannot complain, because the moment you do, her other act, which is the hate act, says the moment you complain, you go to jail for making hate speech. That is how evil that wee shaft of shite is. She is damaging women's safety. She is damaging children's safety. And she is pushing for grown men to get undressed in front of small girls. That's what she is. That tells you who she is and who she wants to please. She is a fucking pea. Anyway, once you're on the drugs, you become very frightened of coming off them because you've made puberty into a phobic object. Sandyford should be shut down. NHS England has agreed that the gender service at Tavistock be shut down for these reasons. And it's not that English children have different bodies or genes or minds to the Scottish children. No, it's just that the English law, we've found out what the shit bollocks is going on in these places. And we've said enough is enough. This is unbelievably horrific. The new report into the clinic in Glasgow comes after the Scottish Government's gender recognition bill, which would allow individuals to change their sex just on a whim, was voted passed the first stage vote last week. This was despite 7 nationalist MSPs voting against and 2 abstaining, the biggest rebellion since the SNP came to power in 2007. Nicola Sturgeon's government has been repeatedly criticised over the bill in recent weeks, highlighted in repeated clashes between the first minuscule and author J.K. Rowling, God bless her. Ms Rowling branded the leader a destroyer of women's rights, a destroyer of women's safety, and also someone who wants to put the children of Scotland into the hands of grown men. Ms Sturgeon said last month, "I've spent my entire life campaigning for women's rights, and I'm a passionate feminist with a lot of evidence behind that. I think you're lying through your tiny, horrible, ugly teeth, you shit." In a thinly veiled attack on the credential of Miss Rowling and members for Women Scotland, she said, "There are no shortages of attacks on women that feminists, real feminists, as I consider myself to be, should be focusing on right now, and accusing them of trying to stigmatise and discriminate against transgender people." Well, quite right, we should discriminate against transgender people. We don't want men undressing in front of children, and we don't want men battering women on a sports field. And if you cannot understand that, you've got no business standing in Parliament, you officious little turd. Asked to comment on the Sandyford report, the Scottish Government, which commissioned the service in the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, said that treatment decisions were rightly for the clinicians to make in consultation with the patients following specialist assessment. But they're not getting specialist assessment. They're not seeing psychiatrists, because if they were, over half of them wouldn't be there because they've been diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety, or autism. They would not be there. So that's a load of bullshit straight away. What is wrong with these people? Why are they so passionate? This is it. Why are they so passionate about destroying children? There's something sick inside them. These people are sick. They're warped. They're deviant. You know, to do this to a child, you've got to be something wrong with you. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there and come up, but it is disgusting what's happening. Given the number of children that are going through this, you can guarantee, without any question of doubt, that a lot of them will have been pushed through against their will. They will have regrets, and they will sue. And the cost to NHS Scotland is going to be immense. What is the cost of the sterilisation of children? Now, there will be a monetary value placed on it, but I think more than that, there needs to be serious prison time. I mean, we're talking 20 years. Because if you did this to a child, I mean, let's put it this way, it could be considered a war crime. It's certainly a crime against humanity. Forced mass sterilisation. That's what you're looking at here. And if it's targeted to any particular group, the autistic, therefore it's disabled, for example, then that carries a surcharge on any penalty. People could possibly do 30 years for this if it was successfully prosecuted. And I would love it to be successfully prosecuted. And I'd love to see these people get 30 years in prison. Because not only would they get the correct punishment for what they have done, it would also stop any future. I tried to think of a word that will keep it this side of YouTube's guidelines, but you know, you can invent your own words to put into that gap. But these people, they need to be taught a lesson. And the lesson is, you do not destroy children. Because that's what they're doing. Anyway, at least it's come out in the open now. Thank you for listening. Bit of a long video this time. But I did get carried away. But I felt it was very important. Anyway, she'll stop now. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notification of future output. Leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, pay attention to what your children are saying, and goodbye.